approximately 40 staff. But the biggest change was the update of submission of documents for those background and clearances through a digital system. Unfortunately, previously it was done kind of, I would say, paper, but more paper in the sense of that documents were actually emailed, and our staff had to kind of sort through emails, pull up documents, and sometimes the scan didn't kind of go through. I would speak actually for the state, who has a part of the clearances as well too. They also implemented a digital system. We're kind of in lockstep with them as far as that's concerned.
I appreciate that. I actually want to ask EMS a question. So in terms of the response times, I just want to follow up on what Chair Ariola was talking about. So I worked at EMS on the admin side some years back, and so this was in the mid-90s, and one that was pre-fire department being involved, and also pre-GPS on the ambulances. So with the technological advances that we have now, and plus we have paramedics trained, I think, right in the fire department. So my question is why the response time back then was around 8 minutes, somewhere in there. So I want to know why, what has been done to enhance the response time, because the fact of the matter is that there was a 13-year-old who was stabbed on a bus recently, who, because EMS was slow to respond, died in the hospital. So I'm asking, like, what's being done since there have been so many advances, why we're still in the same place, and why the response time has increased.
So a couple of things. Thank you so much for your service with serving with EMS. EMS was not slow to respond on that particular day in Staten Island. The response times that we arrived at that location was 10 minutes. The call volume compared to 1990 to 2023 is significantly different. Right now, we respond to approximately 1.6 million assignments per year. We have a 7% increase in priority 1, 2, and 3 assignments. So that those are the ones in which we are budgeted for, and those are the ones in which we try to prioritize. Those are our high acuity call types. In respect to that particular area, Staten Island, 38% of that area is FDNY versus 62% is the voluntary hospitals that work in that particular area. Northwell, I believe, is the actual hospital that covers that area in which the stabbing happened, and they have also decreased citywide about 7 tours. They run a total of 77. They took 7 units offline as of September 18th. So for that particular event, the ambulance that covered that area, which is immediately should have been available for that response, was not available because they were inside the emergency room, but we have decreased response for that particular area. In respect to the voluntaries, they're going through the same retention issues that we're having right now. After COVID, there weren't a lot of EMTs and paramedic classes that were being ran. So right now, we're having problems with recruitment, same thing that they're having as well, with recruitment as well as retention. EMS is a very dirty job. People have learned during COVID that they can go off and become nurses and PAs. So it's extremely hard to recruit in respects to that. In respects to things that we have done since the 1990s, we have increased technology, as you spoke about, GPS, utilizing analytics in respects to seeing what areas have higher call volume and then trying to redeploy. In the future, we have some programs such as Adams, which looks at time of day, looks at, excuse me, where we should deploy additional resources when resources become unavailable, so we can have a model that can say, we're going to try to predict where the next call may come in at. So we're hoping that that is going to assist us. But right now, retention and making sure that we have the proper staff and is the priority to make sure that everybody can get an ambulance in a timely fashion.
No, I appreciate that. If there's anything that the council can do to help in terms of recruitment, we want to do that. I believe that the EMTs and paramedics are underpaid. That's a separate issue. I know that's not your specific issue, but I want to put that on the record. I think that would help with retention and recruitment. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Department of Buildings, I want to ask you if, in terms of enforcement, do you have a breakdown? We were looking at the MMR in terms of borough, like enforcement by each borough?
Yes, absolutely. Those numbers are available. and we can break
Can we
it down.
get them?
Absolutely,
Can you bring them to the council? Because in Queens, there are some issues there, and I can talk offline about that. Because we want to make sure that each borough is covered in the way it's supposed to be. That's the end of my questions now, Chair, for right now. I'll circle back later.
Thank you very much. Before we go on to buildings, I had another health questions. Health Department, as you indicated, issues violations at restaurants that serve food with cannabis, but they don't issue violations at smoke shops that serve food products with cannabis. Why? Because we understand that the law allows for it.
Thank you for the question, Council Member. So obviously, cannabis has been the topic of issue recently, and with unlicensed cannabis retailers. We work very closely with our city colleagues when they're conducting enforcement. As you know, a lot of the regulations actually reside at the state level. I can tell you that if we are told that there is food prep being done performed on site at a unlicensed cannabis retailer, and they're adulterating that food by adding cannabis, we will take enforcement. It's been very few and a handful.
How many complaints have you gotten? Do you know?
That I will have to get back to you. I do want to differentiate that we're not talking about like gummies that are manufactured by somebody else elsewhere and prepackaged and being sold there. We're talking about if somebody was baking cupcakes or making brownies on site, and we've had a couple of those locations, and they would add either CBD or cannabis to that. We would then along with the Sheriff's Department go on a joint enforcement and issue violations accordingly, but I'm happy to get back to you.
Have any of them been closed down, to the best of your knowledge, based on your inspection?
I can tell you that several locations have been closed down
By Health Department?
by the Health Department because of food safety concerns.
If you could get back to us, because we're trying to close them down, and we have very bad luck.
Happy to work with you,
Thank you very
Councilmember.
much. I want to thank Councilmember Riley and Councilmember Kirschner for being here. There was a 10% decrease from FY22 in the Buildings Department ability to access residential units where there was an illegal conversion complaint. We understand this was because residents are reluctant to provide access. So why are residents more hesitant providing access as opposed to last year or any prior year? And what are people doing to encourage those who are residents to provide access? I think we all know about the challenges of illegal basement or cellar units that have floods, et cetera, et cetera. So what are you doing on that front?
So Department of Building taking really seriously this issue of illegal conversion. As we know, it's affecting quality of life, creating severe pressure on our utility systems, and create traffic obstructions. So we do what we can, not what we can. We do what's necessary to obtain required access. So it's our inspectors first, upon receiving a complaint, and I believe it's a number. It's about 10,000 complaints per year.
On this topic?
On this topic of illegal conversion. So it's between
That's a
8
lot.
to 10,000 complaints we're getting per year, and I believe in this year is going to be based on the trend. We're going to be 8,500 probably. So it's each complaint being investigated, triaged for severity, and obviously when we receive the complaint with the special inspector, trying to obtain the access on the first, obviously, or sometimes people reluctant to provide this access because either door locked. In this case, we just leave a notice, which calls L2 in our forms, with a request for the owner to give us a call and set up an appointment. If within certain period of time, normally we about 1 week or so, no one calling us, we go for secondary inspection and try to obtain an access. If there is no access in this time, inspector trying to observe factors which lead us to believe that this complaint is valid. And with that, we're looking for a ring bell, additional ring bell. If we know the house is supposed to be two-family and we see several additional ring bells, obviously it's, there is a good possibility that someone converted something illegally. We're looking for additional mailboxes. We're looking in the cars parked. We're looking at a number of doors. So it's if, in this case, if we observe all of those characteristics and still there is no access, it goes to our attorneys to obtain access warrant. So it's, and we're quite successful. I believe it's around 80 to 90% of our access warrants being warranted, but not all. So it's, and I agree absolutely with this question that not all, and the people, it's understandably, whoever is doing something illegal, they're trying to hide. On top of this, sometimes just our visit itself lead to discontinue of illegal use. Just this is also good seeing our inspectors walking around the house, knocking on the door, leaving a notice. It's also kind of a message left for the homeowner. Stop it. So it's in all scenarios it looks like it's a good action.
Right. I mean, I could say in my area, people subdivide and then throw 6 roommates in there, and that, of course, would be frightening for any kind of fire or something else, because you wouldn't even know who's living there. So this is a huge issue, and I hope that you're figuring out what you can do, because people are not going to give you access if they're breaking the law. So I do think that needs more attention.
I agree with you.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay, in terms of HPD, what is the average caseload for HPD inspectors? Because I know they have a hard job. And has it increased or decreased as a result of staff vacancies? I'm glad that you're all having job fairs. You should know the mayor said no more job fairs, so I'm glad you're having job fairs. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council Member. So our inspectors, depending on what unit they're in, have different workloads. And so, you know, if you are a borough office inspector responding to complaints that come in through 311, the number of stops you can do per day is really dependent somewhat on your borough, how far apart the complaints are, the buildings that we have to go to. On average, I think in the MMR, we said about 12 stops per day. But we also have inspectors who do specialized inspections, right, who can do fewer. So lead inspections typically can do 3 or 4 inspections a day because the inspections are much longer. Inspectors assigned to our special enforcement units, like our anti-harassment unit, may only do 1 building a day because they're in the whole building and they're knocking on every door. So it really depends on what unit that inspector is assigned to.
All right, and how far behind? I know whatever it says in the MMR is probably not good, but how far behind are you in terms of staffing for this to be able to keep up with what is a huge workload?
Yes, and we have come a long way since last year, so I'm really feel like we're in a good place for this year. We have about 60 more inspectors going into heat season, which hopefully will help us, again, continue to claw at any remaining backlog, but also help us get ahead. One thing we do is we prioritize, right? So during heat season, heat and hot water complaints are prioritized. We respond to those much more quickly than your average complaint.
Okay, and I hope you will tell later how you are going to figure out a way of not having as many heat complaints in the future. There's nothing worse than no heat in a cold season. All right, Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Brewer. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off with DOB and actually also pick up on a question that Councilmember Brewer asked earlier regarding construction injuries. So I understand you said 229 inspectors are in the construction site safety unit, and you said 4 hours is the response time for reactive inspections. So same question actually that we just asked HPD, what is the inspector's caseload?
Yeah, I just want to make a slight correction. It's 129 inspectors assigned for safety and 4 hours for inspectors to react to type A complaints. So it's inspectors. So it's interesting question that you ask, because we're looking on in a way our inspectors work. And as I said, we introduced technology in inspection routing, and after long search of, we finally seems to be found a product which works with the specifics of Department of Buildings. So it's, in addition to that, we're trying to, in order to increase frequency of our inspections and the essence of our inspections, we need to make more inspection. We just feel the Department of Buildings is supposed to apply projections over the site. So it's, people always feel our presence. This makes site more accurate, more compliant. And with that, we're looking at inspectors loading. So it's, right now, it's not yet introduced, but we're working at establishing complicity performance characteristic of each inspection, because one inspector can perform 2 inspections per day, another inspector perform 12. And you cannot say which inspector work hard or work harder. So that's why we'd like to assign, in order to compare inspectors' performance, promote them, encourage them to do so, and reward them for work well done. We need to establish these performance characteristics, which we're currently working on it, and we're hoping to apply in near future. So it's visiting the site. It's interesting that, yes, I agree, you absolutely correctly pointed out the number of incidents in your introductory statements. It's risen, and it's in part, it's of course because we have a lot more people introduced to the construction site, pick up in the construction industry, and the percentage is 7%. It's in part probably contributing factors. But on top of this, we have to remember that each developer, each contractor, each owner, they want to complete their site sooner, because cost of construction is high, and each day of construction contributing to this cost. So obviously, we don't want to slow down, but we need to be in line. We still want to make sure that this site maintain required safety. So with that, we're meeting with the industry monthly, with each industry representing contractors in New York City, a variety of organizations. As we said, site safety cars to the employees, that's helping a lot. So it's people trained. Construction supervision, superintendents will be, a number of superintendents per site will be reduced. This will add it. We're introducing additional licensing for a variety of trade. Construction, as I said, it's very dynamic industry, and it's keep going. It's a new equipment introduced, new profession. So we need to stay, work step by step along with the construction industry, not to be behind, not to be reactive. So we're trying to stay proactive and to be a little bit ahead if we can and when we can.
Thank you. And just on site safety, the site safety cards, we had a hearing last year. We were in the process of rolling them out. How often is DOB finding that workers don't have their SST cards?
Yes, it still happens, but fines it's so severe. So I believe it's tremendously reduced, because it's fines an issue to the contractor, issue to the owner. So it's tremendous fine associated with for workers not having site safety card. And I don't know if you notice around the city, now site safety cards being used as an access card to the construction site. Mm-hmm. So worker who has either fraudulent or do not have a site safety card cannot even enter the site. So this is very, I believe it's very positive movement, and we're really happy that this is happening. And as a future for our site safety cards, we are looking into introduce virtual cards. So it's like its cards itself represent this tremendous expense for the department to produce. They lost. So it's we would like to see if it's a virtual card which could be preserved on the phone or some by other means. So this will replace eventually those plastic cards available to the employees.
Just one more question on the site safety cards. So, well, 3-part question. All sites, any construction site anywhere in the city is subject to having workers have their site safety cards?
Sites where construction superintendent is required. So this is majority of a construction safety professional is required. So it's a majority of construction sites in New York City.
But a small 2-family home or something?
Small if it's minor alteration which do not require construction superintendent presence.
Is there anything that DOB has noticed at this time regarding where you're still seeing SST card violations?
We do. It's unfortunately majority of our issue with site safety card trainers, okay? And we're trying to audit them periodically to make sure there's no fraudulent cards issued, make sure that attendance is in place. So it's we're hitting really hard if we find someone who is not fulfilling requirements for training. But in general, it's great improvements, and I really see this as a positive development.
Got it. Thank you. So, I mean, the numbers are still stark, 35% increase this year over last year with 685 injuries this year. So what is DOB doing to try to drive more safety, and what do you need from the State Department of Labor or from OSHA in order to support your work here?
I will start from the end of your question. So we're working very closely with OSHA. OSHA organization is kind of small in our region, so we're working very closely to supplement their efforts. And we have monthly meeting when we discuss the way we're visiting the site, improving the safety, identifying our targets. Yes, it's even one accident or one death on the site is a lot. So it's with increase of construction activity in the city, of course, it's like we're going to probably see more, unfortunately, accidents. But as I said, we continue doing our proactive inspections, visiting the site. We continue enforcing our rules, make sure toolbox meetings, it's everyday discussion with workers is implemented. We continue to talk to the industry. We issue our buildings news letter, which sent to about like 500,000 people, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So it's constantly developing. We're developing our code, make it more easy to comprehensible, more easy to understand, with more straightforward provisions. So our website is kind of expanded to provide workers information on safety requirements. We published to the contractors, we published reason where stop work orders can be issued, so they know exactly what to expect. So we're kind of trying to make information which available to our inspectors. We're trying to make the same information available to the industry participants. So it's this way we can kind of keep yourself responsible equally.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And I've seen you all on the ground in the Bronx, and I know that there's a lot of outreach, so I just want to thank you for those efforts. My next question is around the relationship between enforcement inspections and then violations. So we see that just 6% of enforcement inspections resulted in violations compared to 10% in fiscal 22, which is a 13% in fiscal 2020. So what is driving this relationship? Why are we seeing fewer violations issued when we have more inspections happening?
Honestly, from my opinion, this is positive fact. Although I'll see it, might reflect that not enough violations issued. But this is become, as I said, information become available, and now once information available, contractors know what to expect from our inspector. What are we searching? So what are we looking? How the work process is supposed to be conducted? So I believe it's a little bit of follow-up from our communication, our outreach, our code improvements, improvements of our websites, our training, introduction of new licensing. This is all leading to, as a matter of fact, I'd like to mention that our stop work orders greatly reduced. And we're proud to say that now, which used to take months, now it's like to lift the stop work order take only 22 days in average. So this is kind of, we feel, great success, and this is not just us, because industry working with us. They realize they have a partner, and it's important for us to keep this partnership going.
Okay. Let's just make sure that we're working to have all these trends travel together, because it doesn't make sense that injuries are going up while violations are going down. So that relationship needs to track on all sides. So my last question here is about boiler inspections. The MMR reports that there has been a significant increase in violations issued in fiscal 23 that was largely due to roughly 100,000 boiler inspection reports from prior years, including these boiler inspections, excluding the boiler inspections. How did the number of violations issued change from fiscal 22 to 23?
I believe this significant increase is because we issued violations for prior years. We generated violations which were not issued at the time of COVID, and that would cause this significant increase.
So it took, I see that the violations were issued, violations were for failure to file annual boiler inspection reports from 2018 to 2021. It is now 2023. So when were they required, when were buildings required to file inspections that were behind for boilers?
Buildings required to comply with this inspection yearly and submit the report to the Department of Buildings, but due to COVID, it was a decision made at the time by prior administration to give people a break and let them, we allowed to submit following year's inspection without paying for violation for prior year. And this year, we decided to issue those violations as well.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner Santiago, we're going to talk a lot about heat and hot water on Monday. Thank you for participating. But just in connection with the boiler inspections, does HPD work with the information regarding boiler inspections that DOB receives? Does that inform your enforcement on heat and hot water complaints? And how often are faulty boilers the root cause?
So we don't work directly with that data, but we do collaborate with the Department of Buildings in a number of ways. So one way is that every summer, in collaboration with DOB, we send out information to property owners, reminding them to have their boiler inspections done, to submit those reports, timely. The other way is in relation to our heat sensor program. We are working with DOB at this point, helping them to target those buildings for inspections. So we're providing them information, and we're going to work together on that project this year going forward.
Okay, got it. So you send the reminders for DOB's.
We have, because of our annual property registration information, we have a good line to property owners, and so it makes it a good collaboration to be helpful around joint issues that affect us. So,
great, thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Moving back to emergency violations, a discussion that we started. So the percentage of emergency violations corrected by an owner fell from 57% in fiscal 2019 to 50% in fiscal 2023. So private owners are correcting few of the emergency violations that they are receiving. During that time period, the percentage of emergency violations corrected by HPD also fell. We talked about numerators and denominators. We love talking about math. But just to kind of, focus on the goal here, right? So the ultimate goal is to make sure that HPD's enforcement actions on the ground, having the inspectors out there, they're a deterrent effect, like DOB just mentioned, and that it's also compelling landlords to behave, right? And to provide for their tenants. So can we talk about this discrepancy? So are we seeing, is the agency seeing a reduction in the amount that private owners are responding to emergency violations?
So we're not. The issue is that number reports within the fiscal year. And because so many of our violations now take longer to resolve, the resolution of those violations doesn't happen until after the reporting period, right? So for example, self-closing doors, which is the biggest increase in violations, right? Owners have 14 days to correct. HPD has 20 days to re-inspect. The owner certifications have 70 days to become deemed complied. These all push the actual compliance reporting outside of the period. And so I think what we really need to do, trying to simplify what I was trying to say before, is not end when we do our reporting, report the compliance of the violations issued within the fiscal year, even after, if the compliance happens after the end of the fiscal year as an arbitrary date, we want to still report that to you, right?
Right.
So where we are is actually pretty consistent with previous reporting.
Okay.
Back in the old days, most C violations had to be fixed within 24 hours, right? And so a lot more activity happened the same fiscal year that the violation was issued, the correction was required. So we want to look at that and make sure that we're giving you accurate numbers. And we will give you the owner percentage and the agency percentage as requested.
Okay. So, but we're still not at 100%. I know you're saying you're going to recalculate and use more reasonable denominators, but can you give us a sense? Is it more like 80%? Is it more like 90%? How we're doing on compliance from owners?
Part of the compliance number is also indicates where we can't get access to verify whether it's complied. And so there's always going to be a percentage of tenants where we can't get in to verify, where we don't hear from the owner. We do attempt to call tenants to verify. We do attempt visits to verify. And I think that percentage is pretty consistent over time as well.
Thank you. So I look forward to having more conversation on that. Last year's, during our code enforcement hearing last year in December, we talked a lot about certifications to correct and false certifications to correct. So pursuant to Local Law 117 of 2019, HPD does audit 15% of certifications to correct. And the last report that the council has, which is from July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, 32% of the audited certifications were false. That was a big realization, an important, sort of target for improvement that we identified together last year. Has this improved? What does the number look like now?
The percentage, I think as we pointed out in that report, and I would think that there would have been a more recent report, so we'll make sure that you have whatever is the most recent report that we did. The biggest violation that appears as false certified is actually pest violations, right? So mice and roach violations. And I think, part of our concern is the compliance period for those violations actually a realistic period? And so we have been discussing that with the Department of Health and may come to you with some recommendations regarding how to better allow property owners to correct that violation. Right now, pest violations have a 21-day correction period. It is very difficult, if not absolutely impossible, to treat pests in 21 days, right? I'm sure, as we all know, it's going to take multiple treatments. It's going to take some work in order to eradicate a pest condition. And so we just want to be realistic about that.
Great, thank you so much. Then I'm going to ask one more question of DOHMH, and there's a lot of us here, so want to keep my time short. But for the Department of Health, and I look forward to hearing more about the calculation the updated recommendation for how to think about pest certifications. So Department of Health, Mr. Wong, I represent the district where we lost Nicolas Feliz Dominici, and just wanted to follow up on a concerning anecdotal story that I've been hearing from several providers and several places in the Bronx at least. So we talked a lot about the backlog, and DOHMH is still behind about 2,000 inspections from pre-pandemic levels. I've heard of providers family-based providers who have their licenses that were never physically inspected. They opened during the pandemic and they were never physically inspected. Again, this is anecdotal, and so I just want to understand, what does this mean on the ground, DOHMH being behind by 2,000 inspections from pre-pandemic levels? Are we talking about many of Article 47 inspected by DOHMH sites that have not been physically visited by an inspector?
The MMR reports the information for Article 47 locations. Those are like group child care centers. They're not the home-based child care providers. Those are regulated and overseen by the state, so that information is not included on that. Yeah.
Okay. Does, for clarification and reminder, DOHMH inspects home-based cares?
Under contract with the state.
Under contract. So are there home-based child care centers that have not been inspected by an inspector physically on site?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Yeah, please do. Just have heard very concerning reports there. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back to Chair Brewer.
Thank you. I think Department of Health, we should know how many inspectors we know in terms of 47, but we should also have that state that you are under how many have been inspected and how many have not, to pick up on Councilmember Sanchez's. If you could get back to us with that information.
Happy to follow up, Councilman.
Okay. Councilmember Holden?
Thank you, chairs, and thank you all for your testimony. I'm going to ask each agency a question and then and wait till I get down the line, and then you could start answering it. So I'm going to ask the fire department. Chief, we've had an increase of fire-related deaths from 2020, 63, in 2020, 21 we had 73, 22 we had 99 that you testified, and 86 so far this year. A lot of it, I guess, is attributed to the e-bike, the batteries and the explosion of those batteries. So I've gotten a lot of complaints in my district from constituents that not only the charging of the e-bikes and the batteries inside garages of attached homes, a 1 and 2 family, we can't gain access. Tried with the building department, we couldn't gain access. So they're still there, months after the complaints. I got a lot of complaints, an explosion of complaints of SROs, just people packing into, again, 1 and 2 family attached homes. And then even parking in front of an entrance, a stoop. The people are, so many cars, no parking. We're getting, DOT is eliminating a lot of parking spaces, so people are desperate and they're parking. So I'm trying, that's a building department complaint, but gaining access is the question I want to ask you. Now I want to ask a question of the DOHMH. Commissioner Wong, how many inspectors do you have? That's the first question. And the second part of that is, do you inspect illegal vendors, food vendors, who are all over the place? That's another big explosion we're seeing throughout the city. So that's a major concern of my constituents. DOB, same thing about access. In previous years and previous administrations, to gain access, actually residents who witnessed the violations could sign an affidavit for the access warrant. That's not, it's really hard for me to get, and I had to go right to the commissioner, Commissioner Otto on this, because I couldn't get the borough, Queensborough commissioner to even address this. The legal division of DOB, they don't want to issue, they don't want to even take an affidavit from people who live there next to it, have seen the violations. And the same thing with charging e-vehicles inside garages, 25 people living in a one-family home. I have tons of those complaints. So why aren't we doing the access warrant affidavits anymore, or court-ordered inspections? And then finally, HPD, Deputy Commissioner, I'm being told that while your inspectors inspecting buildings for self-closing doors do not check on the fire safety rating of these doors. They're not taking a 52-minute, 53-minute course that everyone should take to identify. They're just identifying the closing of the doors, but not are they fire rated, that's the most important thing. If they're not fire rated, the fire can go right through the doors. So to take a less than an hour course to understand that, your agency is not doing that. That's what I'm being told. But go ahead, I'm sorry, Chief.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you for the question. So I'll start with the fire-related deaths in the city. We mentioned before that the number so far this year is 86. Last year for the whole year was 99, and that, of course, included the twin parks from the single day. Part of that increase, again, for this year is we've had 14 fire deaths related to fires started by lithium-ion batteries. 6 in the previous 2 years, and going back to 2020, 2019, that was 0. So that alone is part of the the increase. When the fire department performs building inspections, we go to a multifamily house or an apartment building. All we are able to do by law is inspect the common areas of that building, the stairways, the public hallways, the roof, the cellar, the basement, the rear yards. If we happen to be inside a residential occupancy for a fire or emergency response, and we notice that there's, that they're divided up into SROs, maybe they're all individual locks on the doors. Once we're inside there for an emergency response, we are able to maintain control of that and then take action. We would notify Department of Buildings, we would collaborate and then decide if it warrants a vacate. But just getting the complaint like that, unfortunately, we're not able to go in if the person that's present there does not allow us to come in.
Is that done often, though, when you work with the building department?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's not uncommon if we're there for a fire and emergency, and we'll call them, and they come out, and we figure it out.
DOH, okay.
Thank you for the questions, council member. So when you ask about total inspectors, are you saying in the entire agency?
Yes, the total inspectors that you have for, especially for food violations, like I'm talking about vendors, street vendors, and also for illegal vendors that we're seeing popping up all over the place, even street corners in my district,
Okay.
mostly people walking in traffic selling food.
So I want to make sure I clarify, too, that earlier this year, the administration designated the Department of Sanitation as the lead agency on vending enforcement. That's both food vending and also general vending as well, too. We do have mobile food vendor inspectors. I don't have those numbers on me. I'm happy to follow up with your office and get back to you. But the lead agency on vending enforcement now is the Department of Sanitation.
So sanitation is taking over the food inspections of...
Well, no. So inspections and permitting of mobile food vendors is still done with the health department. But if you're talking about enforcement, as far as unlicensed mobile food vendors, unlicensed general vendors, vending in locations that are not supposed to be, the enforcement is conducted by the Department of Sanitation.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to echo Chief Esposito on issue of inspection. So you mentioned about parking, and this is jurisdiction of Department of Buildings. So it's a zoning regulate how much of the parking and where cars supposed to be parked. And if it's issue referred to us by the fire department, it's treated with highest priority. So we almost, if department call us and saying like we're in the field and observing certain condition, we can send inspector immediately, or we plan collaborative inspection on a certain day. That's what related to the question regarding parking, obstruction of egresses, conversions, or illegal sellers.
But we're not gaining access. So do you have a paper that is an affidavit that somebody could sign that they swear they're a witness that they could, and that will generate an access warrant or a court order?
That's correct. So it's this is second part I was going to discuss with you. So it's. My understanding is in the past, prior Deputy Commissioner of Enforcement, our attorneys accepted owners or tenants' affidavit or neighbors' affidavit. It goes for this in court. I need to explore this further, see what's the implication of it, and understand this a little more. So it's like we can get back to you and discuss this, because this legal.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. So, and if we're not, and again, it's doubly bad when we have attached homes that, in a fire, especially with e-bikes, if they're in a garage and I got a report of dozens in a garage of a small one-family home that's attached, that's a recipe for disaster here. So unless we start to address this with an access warrant that the neighbors are willing to sign, and I can't get that. I've been trying for months now. I had to go to the commissioner.
I understand this, and this is, as I said, this our attorney is supposed to answer this question, and I will get it more information, and we'll get back.
Okay, thanks. Last one.
Thank you, Council Member. So on fire safety and fire safety doors, the biggest concern has been in the recent fires that have happened, not just the Twin Parks fire, but the one prior to that, is the self-closing nature of the door. And we met with the fire department, have been meeting with them over the years to improve our training around fire safety doors. Our current training, which is about an hour itself, covers how to identify the problem, what problems to look for. So we, and in addition, our inspectors go through a pretty rigorous training overall. It's about a 4 or 5 week training, and it includes not just fire safety and fire safety doors, but lead-based paint, mold, heat, our training is pretty extensive for our inspectors.
So they know how to identify a fire-rated door?
They know how to identify when a door is clearly not fire-rated. A hollow core door, for example, a violation will be issued.
So they've taken that course on identifying?
They have not taken, I believe you're referring to a different course than what I'm
Well, there's
suggesting
a
that we
course
do.
that is offered how to identify a fire-rated door.
And we do our own
do
in-house
that.
training, and again, we've
Okay.
collaborated with the fire department in order to help identify what are the biggest risk areas.
Thank you, chairs. Thanks for the extra time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Councilmember Ayala, Councilmember Felice, and now we're going to hear a question from Councilmember Narcisse.
Good afternoon. I started from morning. How does the FDNY communicate its finding and inspection schedules to the public? That's one. Are there mechanisms for residents or stakeholders to report concern or issues related to fire safety system?
So the different types of fire, the different type of inspection that the fire department conducts. So our fire companies that are in the field, we don't schedule those inspections. So, you know, the local firehouse, I mentioned before, they have their risk-based inspection. Those will come up, and each company has a goal of inspections to meet during the week. So an address will come up, and they will just go out there that day. That's an unannounced inspection. You know, that they'll meet with the building personnel and conduct that inspection. There are inspections that are scheduled to the Bureau of Fire Prevention. For example, any machinery that poses a fire threat or equipment that's required by the fire code, the Bureau of Fire Prevention inspects that. The inspections and the plan reviews for alarm systems, that can be scheduled, but a lot of those as well are unannounced inspections.
Thank you. For daycare, can you provide a breakdown of daycare center inspection by borough, if you can, and how do the current figures compare to the previous year for each borough? Do you have that?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Coming back from fire FDNY, you know you're one of my favorites, because as a registered nurse for many decades, everyone run away from fire, you go forward. So I do appreciate you. And the city of New York been under a lot of crisis, I would say, lately. You have seen your way through many difficult circumstances, right, in the past. And I have full confidence to tell you honestly that you will get us through what we're going through right now. I heard my colleagues about Floyd Bennett Field, right? I'm assuming that you're gonna be going around there if that's happening, which I will tell you, I'm not comfortable for people to be in Floyd Bennett Field, and I know so many of us, but we are dealing with a crisis, and we have to figure it out. Instead of having people on the streets, we rather have people in a place where we can manage and do the best we can as a city, instead of seeing people on the sidewalk. But while I was sitting here, I was looking at the statistic, because my colleagues mentioned about fire and safety. In LA, because LA Times wrote in an article, 24 fires a day surging the flames at LA homelessness encampment, right? Those are not the one like Floyd Bennett Field. I'm talking about the different camps that you see throughout the city of LA, right? In the 3 years since the Los Angeles Fire Department began classifying them, fires related to homelessness have nearly tripled the one that's in a different part of the city, right? In the first quarter of 2021, they occur at a rate of 24 fire a day. I'm talking about in different encampments throughout the LA, right? Making up 54% of all the fires department responded to. So in your capacity, would you say you would have more fire having people encamping all different throughout our city, or having a structure where you can go and teach folks how to prevent fires, and knowing that all the folks that involve to provide the care will be able to follow?
So I can't speak on that article. I haven't seen it. I'm not aware of the issues that LA City has. But we are, in New York City, we are not seeing a fire problem with homeless encampments. We're not seeing an uptick of fires there or fire-related injuries. You know, the fire department, our duty is to enforce the fire code. And having whatever structure or building that people are going to be living in and sleeping in, it's our duty, and we plan and expect to enforce the fire code there in the effort to make it as safe as possible.
Thank you. But you're not going to see it as LA, because that's what we New Yorkers trying not to have.
Correct.
We're trying to make sure we don't have encampments throughout the city of New York, because this is a city of immigrants. Myself, you can hear the accent, right? So therefore, we are responsible for the people, and then to make sure that they're not on the street in different part of our city. I mean, I am representing the 46th district where Floyd Bennett is, right? But by the way, I love my colleagues because she's representing the 46 with me. But we have to do whatever it takes to make sure people are safe, and I'm counting on you, because I know we can count on our fire departments, FDNY, because you're the best. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the support.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Ariola, Councilmember Sanchez, because they're chairs, and then Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chief. And Floyd Bennett Field, other than fires, has an evacuation issue in case it does get flooded. So that's another reason why we need to have all the agencies do their drills there and make sure that people can be removed safely. Since when we do have climate incidences and hurricanes, we do not use Floyd Bennett Field, and in fact, we pass Floyd Bennett Field because flooding is so terrible there. And we wait until the flooding recedes before we have any type of supplies brought in. Just to get back to the reduced fire alarm plan review, you had mentioned that the times have decreased from an average of 13 to 16 weeks to 2 to 4 weeks, which is terrific. And but then you go on to say that additionally you've removed redundancies. You didn't explain what the redundancies are. We just need to know what that is.
So they've made it more effective. So, for example, in the past, somebody would submit their fire alarm plan for review. If there was a problem with it, they would issue a letter of no objection and basically deny it and close it out when there might have been 1 or 2 issues that needed to be addressed. So it would be closed, they'd issue the letter of no objection, it would be closed, and now they have to go through the process of filing it again. Now what they're doing is if there was, say, a small issue with the enunciator panel, if everything else has been approved, all they need to do is square away the part with the enunciator panel, and then it gets approved. So it, you know, the efficiency on our side and making it easier for the applicants of 9 parts are good. There was 1 part that needed to be addressed. Correct that, and then they get their permit, or we do the on-site inspection or the you know, the test of it.
Great, that makes sense. And then Chief Fields, I want to go back to the decrease in units that we have on the street with ambulances. So you said in 2019 we had 460. During the COVID year, we had 519, and then in 2022 we went back to 460. So although the units on the street had decreased, did the calls decrease as well?
No, they did not.
They didn't. So that's something we really need to take a look at, because we can have less ambulances on the street when the call volume is still high, and we have to get to people who are in jeopardy, God forbid, having a heart attack, and you only have seconds to get there. So thank you for that. I needed that clarification. No problem. And I want to thank you also for having the answers to all the questions that have been asked of you today. And no, they did not have the questions beforehand. So thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez, but I also want to introduce Councilmember Williams.
Thank you so much, Chair. I have just a short question for FDNY. Can you remind us how FDNY uses information from the risk-based assessment that you conduct that informs risk-based inspections?
Because of the number of buildings there are in New York City, it's not possible for us to inspect every building every year. So over time, we wanted to come up with a way for us to put our firefighters as inspectors into the buildings that are more likely to have an issue, have a problem. So we look at several factors. The age of the building, the construction of the building, are there previous incidents? Have we had some small fires there or complaints there? Is there auxiliary fire protection systems? Is there a sprinkler and alarm system? And they kind of put all that information together, and comes out with a priority list of locations for our fire companies to go out and inspect. Ideally, we should be spending more time in maybe the older row frame attached buildings that if there is a fire, it's going to be a bigger problem than maybe a brand new, concrete building with a sprinkler system.
Got it. Thank you. And do you look at any neighborhood characteristics, or is it really site-specific factors?
I think it's all specific to the building, the building characteristics, and the history of either complaints or fires or problems in the building. And that we generally do not include private dwellings. We consider a 1 or 2 family building a private dwelling, and unless we had specific complaints for that, because generally there's not a public hallway or public area of that building to inspect, because as I said before, we do not go into the living areas. We don't go into somebody's kitchen or living room and perform an inspection there.
Got it. Thank you so much. So then now Commissioner Kavanaugh actually promised the council to make sure that FDNY sends us the algorithm that you use to calculate risk of buildings. We still haven't received that since April of last year. Would you be able to make sure that the agency?
Yes, where I wasn't aware of that, yep.
Okay, thank you so much, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Aiello, and then Councilmember Felice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have just one question, and I believe it may have been asked prior to my arrival, but it's related to the increased response times for life-threatening medical emergencies. I didn't hear the response, but I was told that the question had been asked. The reason that I'm asking the question is because I've received a number of complaints from constituents, and one of them was pretty interesting. I received a call from one of my senior constituents who told me that she had been waiting for an ambulance for 6 hours, and I thought she must have called the wrong number, or was confused about where she was calling, and it actually turned out that she had been waiting for 6 hours for an ambulance, and I was told that calls are being prioritized, and that could be the reason for the significant delays. Prior to that, I had received a call from a former colleague whose son had an asthma attack in the middle of the night in the Bronx, and he ultimately ended up passing away. But one of her main, concerns was that the ambulance took a really long time to get there. And then that was followed up by another conversation, and this is all within, I'm telling you, within about a week's time. Another one of my seniors, her mother came to visit from another country, had a heart attack in her apartment. She called the ambulance. The ambulance took forever. The mother passed away, in the apartment, so obviously she was very traumatized. And then it brought me back to last year when my own mother was, saturating at like 33. And she ultimately passed away, not because of that, but it took about 20 minutes. And at that point, I had difficulty getting through to even 911, or getting through to an operator. And I attributed it to an increase in calls because of the pandemic, because there had been an uptick at that point. But a year and a half later, I don't understand why there's such a significant delay and why we're not talking about that, because that to me is pretty serious.
So first off, call types are prioritized. The priorities are 1 through 9. Priority 1, 2, and 3s are the higher priorities. Those will include your cardiac arrests, your chokes, your asthma call types, your shootings, your stabbings, right? On the other end of that spectrum, around the realm of priority number 7s, those call types do not get lights and sirens response, and those call types are injury minors, somebody who has a broken finger or some type of injury to their feet. Say, for instance, EDP call types. For EMS, that's considered low priority. That's a priority 7 assignment. The reason why we do that is because obviously we have to triage the amount of calls that are coming in to see which ones are high acuity, and those take precedent. A low acuity call type, the ones I'm talking about 4 through 7, they can be held because there's no units available. All right, so when you give me I would love to get everybody an ambulance in a timely fashion. But we do have to prioritize where we're going to send those resources at first. The other thing, too, is sometimes the testimony of the person who's calling for the emergency, 1 minute seems like 1 hour. When you have ever been around your family member who's in need of any type of emergency service, they seem to tell us that it takes a long time. When they file those complaints through the confidential complaint unit, we do a thorough investigation in respect to them, and greater than 88% of those calls were in a timely fashion, which we relegate to be 8 minutes or less for priority assignments and about 15 minutes or less for low acuity assignments. I will have to get the details, and you're more than welcome to email me in respect to those so I can look at each one of those case by case, but we do prioritize the assignments based off the acuity.
Now, has that always been the case, or is this something that...
This has always been the case. For the 29 years that I've been on the job, we have designated segment call types for every call type that we dispatch out.
Do we have less ambulances? Do we have less personnel?
We definitely have less ambulances. We do not have less personnel. As I stated earlier, and I know you said you came in, 2020, we, I believe it was June or July of 2020, we surged up because of COVID. We had approximately, during that period of time, 519 ambulances that were in the city. Currently, we're down to 466. That's based off budgeting. We went back to pre-COVID standards in respects to ambulances and tour counts.
And is that what you attribute to an increase in response time?
I mean, there's a lot of things that attribute to the increase in response times. The amount of priority assignments that we respond to has increased by 7%. So that amount of high acuity, priority 1, 2, and 3 assignments are increasing. So that's the number one factor. Number two, small things such as the speed limit in the city. It went from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour. So the lanes, we went from large streets that had 4 lanes to now we have streets that only have 1 lane. It makes it impossible for the regular driver to move out the way of the ambulance, so that's a decrease in response times. The amount of red light cameras that have increased, as well as the speed cameras in certain neighborhoods have increased, so the citizens don't want to move out the way because they're in fear of having to take a day off to go to court so that they can fight a ticket. So there's a lot of things that contribute to it. We have tried to reallocate resources into areas in which the call volume has gone up, and we're working on the analytics to see if we have increased amount of population in one area, how much resources do we have to place into that area so that we can keep call volume down.
And then you coordinate, I'm assuming that these conversations are ongoing with the administration, right, about the possibility of adding resources to purchase new ambulances. I didn't know any, I didn't have the background to all of this, and I find this really interesting and would love to be helpful because I think that there has to be some level of coordination, and we need to be able to make adjustments wherever possible. So if DOT, right, we're authorizing all of these changes so that we're making our city pedestrians safe, we also need to take into account, right, the commuting of emergency vehicles, be they, ambulances or fire trucks or, an NYPD vehicle. How are we navigating that? So I find that, really, really fascinating and would love to have a conversation about that. And I'm sure the chair is doing a fantastic job as well. But as it pertains to my community, I know that we're one of the communities that has some of the highest call numbers, and it concerns me to hear from one of my seniors that she was waiting for 6 hours for an ambulance to come when she felt like, she was really, really sick. And again, even I have a camera in my house, the incident with my mom, I still have it recorded. It took upwards of like 25 minutes. I almost, I was like literally dressed already, and we were on the verge of carrying her out when the ambulance finally arrived. Because again, she was saturating at 32. People don't saturate at 32. And
They do not. You should be saturated
And
at
so-
above 95%. You're right.
Exactly. And so that's alarming, and I think that that's an emergency, right? And those are things that we can't wait for budget to budget, to rectify, that we should be having ongoing conversations. And if there's, a problem that is presenting itself, challenging them, we need to know that, and we need to know that in real time. So I look forward to, trying to figure this out collectively so that we could be helpful, in our own budget negotiation asks, so that we make sure that, this is, because to me, this is one of those things where I almost take for granted that it's a given that if I'm going to call that 911, that I'm going to get immediate, attention, right? That I'm going to get that immediate response. And so for it not to be that way, it's kind of like my little bubble has been, popped, and now I'm paying attention, because I don't ever remember it being this way, right? And so you described that it has historically had, you've had issues, but it hasn't been, to me, as prevalent or as visually in my face as it has been in the last few months, and so a couple of years, actually. But, I gave credit for COVID. I understood the situation, but now we're moving forward. But thank you for that.
No problem.
What would you need to have the kind of response that you think would be appropriate, the 8 minutes and the 15 minutes? Because 6 hours is not 15 minutes, so.
Correct. Thank
what would
God
you
that 6 hours, and I apologize for the 6-hour response, but I would have to get the details of exactly what did they call for and what was the call volume on that particular day. Since COVID, we have had days in which we had 7,000 calls in a day. Most notably, last month, we had days in which we had about 5,300 on average for an entire week. We're budgeted to handle between 4,200 to 4,400 calls per day. So as call volume goes up, and most of those call volumes tend to be an increase in high acuity call types, we reach out to our partners within the 911 system, which is the voluntary services, to see whether or not they can run up additional ambulances to help in those respective areas. Sometimes they can. Lately, they have gone through the same problems that we have gone through financially, as well as retention-wise, so they were not able to assist with that. We are trying to reallocate resources, but in order to do that, that means that I have to take ambulances from one community and then take them and place them into another community. So those are things that I can do internally. That is good judgment on my part. However, when the city council finds out that the ambulance was removed from their community, then the calls come in. So we're trying our best to look at the analytics so we can justify the movement of resources, but more importantly, we always ask for additional needs whenever we can so that we can run more ambulances. Hiring of EMTs and paramedics isn't an easy job. It is a high position. It's a position that people aren't dying to jump out to, and that may be based off salary, which we spoke about earlier. So retention, again, as well as trying to hire people for those positions are pretty hard. Therefore, we have problems with being able to fund or run those ambulances. But it is a work in progress. This is the priority of this administration, to make sure that we can have a decent salary for our EMTs, paramedics, and officers, as well as to make sure that we have the resources in the communities that we serve.
I know about the salary issue. What would be the right personnel number, and what would be the right ambulance number to have the 8 minutes and the 15 minutes?
I'm not going to be able to answer that right now, but I will reach out to the mapping unit and do the analytics and see what they say.
We would like to get that information.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Felice?
Thank you, Chair. A few questions for HPD and also for the fire department. Questions about inspections and inspectors, self-closing door violations, and also fire-related tragedies. So earlier this year, we had a hearing. We talked about the need to hire additional inspectors so we could be able to quickly get an inspection and also have an open violation if there is an open violation. So just curious, how many HPD inspectors do you currently have? And sorry if these questions are some of the similar questions are mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Council Member. Yeah, so I did mention over the past year, we've done a lot of hiring. Last year at this time, we had about 240 inspectors, and right now we have over 310 or so inspectors. So we've really come a long way. There is more to do. We have a new job fair happening at the very beginning of November, which of course will send the notice to all of you. If you can please post it, share it with your constituents. We do need more housing inspectors. So I feel that we're in a much better place than we were, thanks to everyone's efforts. I heard we had a promotion on WBLS the other day for housing inspectors, which was great to hear that, the word is really getting out.
All right, glad we're making some progress on that. How many self-closing door violations have been issued this year so far?
So I can speak to fiscal year 23, if that's okay, right? Because those are the numbers we brought. We can certainly get you this fiscal year to date, if given a day to do that. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, how many have been issued and how many are still open?
So during fiscal year 23, we issued almost 50,000 self-closing door violations. It was about 48,000 were issued. We can certainly get you the closed number, but between the owners certify about 50% of those as corrected, and then our emergency repair program goes out to verify the correction on the others. The percentage is pretty good, but we will get you the exact number.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of how many have been issued this fiscal year, more or less?
I don't. I would imagine we're trending the same way, but we can certainly provide that number to you.
Yeah, and how many re-inspections has HPD done pursuant to that new legislation that we passed last year?
So we've attempted to re-inspect them as they come due. So I want to say all of them that are due, right? We have a certification period. There's the 20 days. We are doing the best we can to maintain within those 20 days. There are periods where it takes us longer. Heat season, if it's particularly cold, we need to prioritize where our inspectors are responding. But we are attempting to re-inspect them all as they come due.
Yeah, and more or less, what percentage of those violations are timely re-inspected? More or less. So generally, 10 days to fix the violation, 20 days for HPD reinspection. More or less, how many are timely reinspected?
At the end of the fiscal year, when we checked, we were timely reinspecting them about 75% of the time, a little bit more than 75% of the time.
Okay, cool. All right, and a few questions for the fire department. So if I remember the numbers correctly, the numbers you mentioned earlier, so this year there's been 86 deaths related to fires. Last year, the numbers were at 99.
Correct.
Including that Twin Parks fire wherein 17 individuals lost their lives. What are the 3 top causes of fires that have led to these deaths? Obviously, e-bikes, one of them. What are the other 2?
So for fiscal year 23, for this calendar year 23, I'll give you the top 4 causes. Electrical is the top cause with 23. Smoking, carelessness with smoking is 15. Carelessness with cooking is 15. And lithium-ion battery is 14.
E-bikes, okay. And also on the issue of response times, do you have any recommendations that you think we should look into in terms of improving those response times that are fire-related and also ambulance-related response times that are a bit...
Well, the fire-related is, the overall congestion of the number of vehicles, and it's not just a Manhattan thing. It's throughout the city, Queens, Bronx, that there just seem to be more and more cars and other vehicles on the road, and that the roadway space just seems to be smaller than it had been. The number of e-bikes. Bikes flowing, the complaints I've heard from some of our firefighters, the bikes or the scooters not following the flow of traffic, right? They're supposed to go in that same direction and instead come in different directions. So as they're trying to make turns, they, literally need their head on a swivel to look in all directions. Just the overall congestion. I'm not sure that there's a singular answer to it, but we'll keep awareness to it.
Okay, thank you.
One question for the fire department, because obviously you talked about the smoke detectors and then the 4 reasons. Regarding the battery problem, which is something that I hope we can solve, apparently there are some subscription suggestions. In other words, you're e-bike driver, delivery or otherwise, and you have a battery that you and I know is not appropriate. You charge it in all the inappropriate, we've heard, situations. One of the suggestions has been there are some of these startups that have subscription, which means I pay $50 a month. I get a new battery whenever I want from a box. I'm being very general about this. But the fire department has not signed off on any of these new ideas. So therefore, we're back to the Councilmember Holden mentioned, the persons in the garage, et cetera. What can we do to speed up, if appropriate, some of these new ideas where you're getting new batteries as opposed to the batteries that are not only ill-conceived, but dangerous?
I wasn't aware of this proposal for that, and certainly we should take a look at it and see. We would support what will get these safe, certified batteries in the hands of people that are going to use them and get the old unsafe batteries removed.
Okay, so I will send you a list of those companies that are the startups that somebody should be looking at. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea, but we'd like to get some resolution, because I have to tell you, I don't think we're moving quickly to get rid of these bad batteries. And I think it's way too slow and way too frightening in terms of the fire situation. Okay. Any other questions, anybody? All right. Thank you all very much for your service and for answering our questions. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We will now turn to public testimony. We will be limiting public testimony today to 2 minutes each. Please note that if your prepared testimony exceeds 2 minutes, in addition to testifying before the committees today, you may also submit your full testimony to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. If you are here to testify in person and if you have not yet completed a witness slip, please visit the sergeant's table and complete a witness slip now, even if you registered to testify online. For in-person panelists, please come up to the table once your name has been called. For virtual panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you and the Sergeant-at-Arms will set the timer and give you the go-ahead to begin. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. Now I will call our first in-person panel. We'll hear from Daryl Chalmers as well as Lyric Thompson.
Go ahead. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, council members. Councilman Velez, who I know very well. We've spoke plenty of times. And my name is Daryl Chalmers. I'm with Local 2507. I represent the fire protection inspectors for the New York City Fire Department. I've been with the fire department 32 years. I also did 7 years with HPD. I was an HPD inspector before I joined the fire department, so I know them pretty well. I'm not going to speak on HPD because I've been gone for a while. But with the fire department, the New York City Fire Department, as far as the fire prevention inspectors, right now, what we need more inspectors. We have a probie class that's going on right now, and it just started on Monday. I was there, I spoke to them. So in my testimony, I just give you a background of what we do. Our job is to make sure the city is safe where anytime you have a building with a fire suppression system. Sprinkler system, standpipe system, we check those systems and we witness the testing of those systems before firefighters have to fight a fire at those buildings. We check for exits, we check in commercial buildings, we check in some residential buildings like you have housing projects. So what we do is we check to make sure that those buildings are safe for the public and also for firefighting operations. We also are going to some of those shelters, and we're also inspecting those right now at this time, based on what the fire department's asking us to do. You mentioned something about faith-based, but you have to understand something. The first thing that takes somebody out in the fire is the smoke, always, very fast. So the issue, if you have an overcrowding situation, if we see that, then we'll have to write the violations based on that if a place is overcrowded. Do you understand what I'm saying? A lot of people panic in a fire. That's why we always check if there's a blocked exit, gates in the public halls. If we see that the doors are not self-closing, we check that. Only in public buildings. HPD, they check for inside the apartment. They check the doors to the apartment. I'm not with HPD anymore, but I'm just speaking on my expert when I was there for a long time. So. But basically, that's what we do. But right now, what we need is more fire protection inspectors. If you look at all the other cities in New York, not just New York City, but in the United States and our country, fire prevention is #1 when it comes to fire safety. We are trained on the code, but we look at it for the safety of the firefighters a lot. Because if they can't get water, they can't do their job. Our job is to make sure anytime there's a building with a fire suppression system, we make sure that system is working. If there's a problem at those buildings, then what we do is we go back. A lot of times we get called to go back after a fire, and they'll call us and say, listen, we have a problem. We tried to get water here, we couldn't get water. And let me explain something about the expertise about us, is that we've had inspectors who are now firefighters. They're lieutenants and captains. They came through our ranks. And they have gone to fire scenes and have said, don't hook up here. Let's go to the other side. And then the battalion chief would say, well, Lieutenant, why did you tell him that? He says, I used to be a fire inspector. I know that's not working. And then when they double checked, it's not working. But that's our expertise. Our job is to make sure that systems and make sure the public is safe and make sure firefighting operation is safe. If you have any questions, you can ask me right now.
Well, thank you for your leadership and your expertise.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just want to thank you, Darrell, for always being such a great resource for us. And even though you are enjoying your retirement, you are still so available to answer any questions and to lend any suggestions. And we do appreciate you each and every time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Go ahead. No, you can't. You can testify. You got 2 minutes.
Since I only have 2 minutes, I'll keep it really brief. The rise in ion fires, one would think that that HPD would actually take fire safety seriously. I see Oswald Felice ran out of here. The codes that govern self-closing doors are NFPA 80. They're built into the construction code, and they are to be maintained and enforced by HPD. When I was putting my testimony together for this year, I realized that I testified last year about this same issue. That 11 months ago, 17 people died in the Twin Parks fire of smoke inhalation while they fled for their lives. This was due to non-code compliant doors. In our case, we've had years of revolving violations with HPD, writing violations, removing violations, 52 right up until May of 2019, when the FDNY, 6 days later, had to come out and remove that defective door hardware before it burned our building to the ground. I'd like to thank the FDNY for keeping us safe. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Now, one would have thought that HPD would have taken note and addressed their inadequacies within their training, especially after the Twin Park fire. I hate to say they have not done it. When I came here last year, December 7th, my door to my building, my front door, was not latching. It was not self-closing, and it wasn't latching. It's still not self-closing or latching. It's in the same condition it was last year. It took me up until last month to get HPD to write a violation. The door has non-UL labeled door hardware on it. It has expanding flammable foam used to pack gaps, and it has not been repaired. Now, when you talk about HPD's training, I'm going to go ahead. Yes, I'll wrap it up. This has been 8 years, Gail. I think I've earned my time.
I know, but you still need to wrap up.
8 years, and HPD's training revolves down to this. I went ahead and full requested their training. In 84 pages, they make no mention of NFPA 80. They make no mention of accessory door hardware that you might find on a door, which needs to be UL tested. No mention of that at all. How to inspect a self-closing door, according to HPD, is 1 page.
Okay.
You test it. You open the door and see if it closes.
But we can read your testimony. We really appreciate that you're put that
Gail, I have
effort in.
written hundreds of emails to each and every one of you. It's not my job to continue to write you. It is your job to enforce the codes and the laws that govern our city. Now, HPD currently is not enforcing those codes. So rather than me writing you another email, which I've done repeatedly for years and years and years, what are you going to do about HPD not properly training their inspectors?
We will follow up as a result of this hearing. We appreciate your testimony, but your time is up.
When will you follow up, Gail?
Not this minute. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll hold you to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you.
Okay.
You guys should be ashamed of yourselves. These men put their lives on the line.
Okay.
2 minutes?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We have now heard from everyone who was signed up to testify. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify in person, please visit the sergeant's table and complete a witness slip now. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify virtually, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you in the order of hands raised. Seeing no one else, I would like to note that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. And now I'll turn it back over to Chair Brewer to close us out.
Thank you very much. This is the first hearing on MMR. We will have another one on November 1st, and we are really serious about following up on what is or isn't in the MMR and what we can do to make sure that people's lives and inspections are done correctly. Thank you very much. This hearing concludes.